Hi, my name's Angus. I'm 11 years old and you're watching Angus Investigates. My guest today is Rachael Stevenson. You may also know her as the director of Reverse Rett. Her daughter and stepdaughter both have Rett syndrome. So my first question for you, Rachael, is before you started Reverse Rett, what type of jobs were you doing?
Okay, so I actually had children when I was really young. I had my first baby when I was only 18. So before that, I was doing my A levels. And then when the children were young, I worked at lots of different places. So I worked at a pizza restaurant. I worked in a cinema, hoovering up popcorn after people have finished watching films. And then I worked also in a nursing home looking after older people. When Amber started to have problems, my interests changed and I became just fascinated with everything to do with what was going on with her. I set up a program in my house where people came in 40 hours a week to do therapy with her. And that really was my job for a couple of years. And then at that time, she was diagnosed with autism. So she was re-diagnosed with Rett syndrome. And then I realized at that point that therapy, there was no amount of therapy that would really make a big difference to her life. So I got a job in disability advocacy, which is about helping other families with issues they might be having with school or accessing the medical help they need. And then I've had, Angus, I'm sorry about this long answer, but I've had a lot of different jobs. So after I'd done that job for a while, that was in America. So we moved back to the UK. And I couldn't really find anything similar here. So I ended up going to university because I hadn't gone when I was younger at the time that people usually go. And then after I went to university, I wrote a book. And then during that time that all of these are going on, I had 3 children and also was looking after them all. And then at this point, I decided that I wanted to find a job to do. And I kept going to interviews and not being hired. And that was when I started to think, what else can I do about Rett syndrome?
So how did you start Reverse Rett and how did you get people to find out about it?
Well, when we started Reverse Rett, so Amber was about 14 and she wasn't doing very well. And like I said, I was looking for a day job that would fit around life with Amber and my other 2 children, which was quite difficult. And after failing so many interviews, I just thought, well, I'll have to stick with what I'm doing, but I need to feel like I'm doing something helpful and useful. And I reached out to the American organization, RSRT, the Rett Syndrome Research Trust, to ask them, what I could do from the UK to support their research. And after speaking to Monica a few times, I realized that the best way to help would be to have a UK organization. So what we did was we didn't really have any money, but I had time because I couldn't find a job and Amber was at school. And so I decided that the best thing to do would be if Monica introduced me to a few UK people, which she did. So she introduced me to Rita, Corey, and Andy. And I started to chat with them about how the organization could develop. And Monica and I organized the setup of Reverse Rett together legally because it was set up in collaboration with them in America. And we all had to contribute a bit of money. And the other people that were in Reverse Rett in the UK had some money because they'd done bits of fundraising, but I didn't. So I took out a loan and so I could have something to contribute, and also so that I could pay off my bills and just get organized to do this work. And things like I had to buy a landline, which I didn't have before, and a printer, and just some of the practical things you need when you're trying to start something. And so the good thing was, to set the organization up, we just really needed a website. But like I said, we didn't really have a lot of money. So I found these two really nice people, James and David, from a company called Symphony Online. And they decided that they were willing to help us set up a website for free. And they did that for us. But they wanted me to learn how to do things like arrange the back end of the website and change it as needed, so that I wasn't bothering them all the time. And that was really difficult. But we did it. And then the way that we reached out to other people was, this was like just as Facebook was beginning to take off. If you can imagine such a time. Obviously, I think it was around when you were born, probably. And it was hard to connect to people in those old days. And so I think I went on another online platform that doesn't exist anymore because it wasn't that good, and met some of the UK families of children with Rett syndrome, and just chatted to them about if they thought they could get involved in this kind of thing. And then that's where I met some of the sort of oldest people that I've known since Reverse Rett began. And then when the charity actually started, we set up the Facebook page and we just went from there. And Andy and I have always run the Facebook page together from the beginning, because we just found that for some reason we had a very similar tone and similar voice on the Facebook page. So people couldn't really tell if it was me or if it was him. It was very consistent. And so nowadays he does a bit more than I do. And sometimes you can tell it's him if there's like a spelling mistake or grammar problem.
What's it like being Andy's boss?
You know, it's not easy being Andy's boss, but it's not easy being anyone's boss. I think the way I work is I'm really motivated internally to do the work, and I quite like just putting my head down and getting on with my own stuff. And I find it bothersome to have to deal with other people, and especially to do the sort of management side of things. It doesn't come naturally to me. Andy in particular is, as well as, you know, me being his boss technically, he's also my boss technically, because he's still a trustee as a founder of Reverse Rett. So I report to the board of trustees. So he's kind of my boss too. And I always kind of say to people when this comes up, that I'm the boss at work, but he's the boss at home. But really, I think it's probably the case that we both pretty equal in all of our different relationships. It's more like some days he'll be carrying me, and another day I'll be carrying him.
Yeah. Do you find it difficult to take time off, as your job is so personal and it might help Amber and Beth?
Yeah. I do. I think the thing is, when you do something like this, it's a labor of love, and it can be all consuming. And the difficult thing and the most important thing is to be very mindful of that, and to make sure that I take time out, because, you know, like I make myself do it, because my ability to continue to do it is only going to go on as long as my health and wellness. And, you know, like last year I had to have an operation on my ear. And so I was very aware during the period that I was ill that I needed to, you know, start looking after myself. I think when you have children, sometimes, especially if you have them very young, you just throw your whole self into it, and you don't remember to actually look after yourself as well. And I think particularly with this job as well, and how important it is to both of us, Andy and I, we have to really just remind ourselves and each other, okay, it's, you know, 10 o'clock at night, stop asking me about emails I've sent, or you know, it's the weekend, let's talk about something else. But pretty much we love it as well. We also love it, what we're doing, and it's really important to us, and it's, you know, a source of passion as well as being something that's draining. So it's just kind of it's a strange situation, but we do our best to be as balanced as we can be.
How many people work at Reverse Rett, and has it been difficult to carry on during lockdown?
Yeah, it's been difficult. So there's myself and Andy is in charge of basically fundraising, but he also manages the clinical trials work when we do the helping with the pharmaceutical companies with the clinical trials. And then we have Beth, who does mostly organizing events and campaigns at Reverse Rett. We also have Wesley, who is patient registry manager, but he also does all of our design work at Reverse Rett. We have Evelina, who does all of our office admin and sends things out to everybody that needs them. And Evelina also supports the clinical trials. And then we have Rashida, who does all of the money related stuff. And Hazel is part-time, and Hazel does fundraising in a particular area of London. And that's the team. But during the lockdown, so when the pandemic first hit last year, as we didn't know really what was going to happen, to protect the charity at the time that it happened, we did furlough everybody except for myself and Rashida. And so I found that personally very difficult, because it was, I'm sure you remember, it was a difficult time for everyone just to get up and do normal things. So trying to carry on with work at the same time was difficult, but I was motivated by what the families of people with Rett syndrome were going through and having to be at home shielding their children, and so kept on that way. And then things we were fortunate that throughout the year things improved a bit, so we started to bring people back to work, and then we were able to have a really good end of the year last year with the big night in and the big give Christmas challenge. And then this lockdown has been another challenge, because for the first month for me personally, my son was off school, but and I was trying to homeschool him. So last year when it was the lockdown, I just ignored school. I thought, well, this is an emergency.
Yeah, my mom.
What did you say?
My mom hates homeschooling. It's only me home at the moment, because Eliza, she goes to school Monday to Thursday, and Felix is in nursery, and Nina's at school, so it's only me at home. But still, she hates teaching me, because sometimes she doesn't understand my work as well.
Well, I have to confess, I mean, how old are you? 11?
Yeah.
So my little boy is 6, and sometimes I didn't understand his work, and I had to watch all the videos with him, especially for maths, so that I could teach him the right way. I mean, some of it's because he's learning things in a different way to what I did at school, and some of them were better. I actually found it quite educational, but it's just very hard to get get through all my own obligations in terms of work, and the kind of deep work that I like to get into is impossible with a 6-year-old around. So when at the beginning of February, I talked to my boss about this, who I think you've already spoke to, John Sharp, and he was very kind to write me a letter to Finley's school. And then I found out that if you work for a charity and you're helping other people, then you're considered an essential worker now. So then he went back to school, and then I could crack on with my work, which has been brilliant. But I think that it's difficult in terms of the charity. I've told you a lot about how I feel personally. In terms of the charity, it's been difficult because in 2020, the government were really good about supporting charities who were responding to the COVID situation. But for charities like Reverse Rett, which are more focused on the specific condition of Rett syndrome and not necessarily on frontline response to COVID, then although our work had to carry on, we weren't receiving any government subsidy for it. So it was kind of hard to weigh up, do we keep everyone at work working to try and still continue with the things that we're doing and trying to raise the money that we're missing? Or do we kind of, make the most of the furlough scheme and, get that money in? But at the end of the day, it's not enough. For the money that we get from the job retention scheme is not enough to subsidize the loss of income that we had. So we now have everybody on 50% flexible furlough. So that means that everybody's working half time basically, except myself. I did for the first month when Finley was at home, but now I'm back to full time, and I think that's working out well. And it's bringing in a bit of money from the furlough scheme, but it's enabling people to carry on doing their work. And also, I think it's really important to everyone who works at Reverse Rett. What we're actually trying to achieve is so important to us all, but also so is having purpose in your life. And everyone needs to feel like what they do in a day matters. And so they were all really glad to come back.
How do you think your life would be different if you didn't have a child with Rett syndrome? What do you think you would be doing now?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I think, probably with me, I just identify having children as having Rett syndrome in my life because I had my first daughter, I was 18 when I had her, as I've said, and then Amber pretty much was 19 when I had her. And then Rett syndrome began to descend. And so I think having Amber gave me a boldness that I wouldn't have had and would probably never have evolved if it wasn't for Amber. Like, I feel like I would have been much less assertive person, and perhaps wouldn't have been able to do the same kind of job. But at the same time, I feel like a sense of justice is really important to me. And I probably would have found some other kind of advocacy role, a job where you're basically arguing for somebody and sticking up for their rights, even if it wasn't a cause that was attached to my own life. Now, I think my interests have evolved so much. I'm interested in things like how the brain works and how that collides with how we think and behave as humans. And I'm still interested in writing, and perhaps I would have still written something if I hadn't had a child with Rett syndrome, although the only book that I have written is about having a child with Rett syndrome. But I still think fundamentally I like writing, and I always liked English literature at school. So I think maybe I would have been an English teacher, but I also think there's times where I think I would have been a lawyer and, gone and had lots of arguments every day. So yeah. Loads of different, I've lived lots of different lives, Angus, to be honest with you, in my imagination.
I think that's a good place for us to end. It's been very interesting talking to you today and finding about your life.
Well, thank you for having me on. I was really pleased you invited me, and I've been very nervous, so I'm glad that it's over. Thanks, Angus.
No problem. Bye.
All right.